Welcome back to Tech, Tesla, and Trends. The TeslaBot is a big, giant elephant standing in this room. There are many people that as they look at what the TeslaBot will create and be able to interact with and the potential models of where it's going to be implemented, there are some concerns to how this will impact the economy. And one of the things that I've been struggling with and thinking this through, there's been a lot of videos and a lot of discussion online and elsewhere about universal basic income and how that will be implemented and what that means and how we will derive meaning from this process based on the coming machine revolution of labor that I've talked about in other videos. Not all of this is going to be intuitive for us. We are going to struggle, and some jobs that we think are completely off the chopping block may actually find themselves as a potentially or partially disrupted task that is being handled at some level through additional TeslaBot or other robot, be it a Boston Dynamics. I don't necessarily see their AI portion of that being up to stuff at this point. Perhaps with Spot that may be more possible. It's more of a telerobotics at least in what I've observed. It's entirely possible that now that Hyundai has gotten a hold of Boston Dynamics, that they're doing something more intuitive with it. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. But that's one of those questions that pops into my mind while I'm talking. Anyways, circling back to universal basic income brings me to how are we going to do this? Because the economy is a massive creature. And if it is disrupted, as we are observing across the world today with what happened with the pandemic and the overall supply chain issues and global destabilizations in many regions of the world because of those supply chain changes and the impacts that those have on the economy as a whole for the world. We have to realize that there are two things at play in all of this. There's obviously the exponential growth world, and which gets into the cost curves and all of the other things that we've been discussing on the channel. But you also have the cognitive capacity that's occurring within processing. And as Tesla builds better, faster processors and better, faster models for machine learning and other avenues for its AI development and programs, and the FSD program continues to develop, and Optimus is given its own development, there's a true possibility here for a lot of jobs. Obviously the first easy ones off the bat are anything that's repetitive. Those are going to be the items that can easily be knocked off. Anything that requires, the proverbial gopher in the loop is going to be not needed. Obviously there's going to be some difficulties that occur. I imagine that union contracts are going to forbid the use of TeslaBot. Well, that's not a solution. That's actually going to hurt those union contracts in many ways. And rather than going down that route, they need to learn how to figure out how to utilize this technological change in the process. Ultimately, we as individuals, as people, are going to have to find meaning in this process of change. And I don't have the answers. That's really one of the things that I'm struggling with and thinking through is, what does this mean for humanity as we begin to enter this phase where disruptions of labor occur because we have automated our labor to an extent that it is no longer necessary for, say, 25% or 50%, depending on some of the estimates I've read. I don't know what that number actually is, but when you look at the numbers, that's a large chunk of people. And it's a scary thought that those people would be completely without the opportunity to have a job. You look at a lot of the automation occurring within the fast food industry. There's not going to be a need for teenagers working in fast food joints. That's just going to go away. There's not going to be a need for your Uber driver. That's going to go away. And as you look at that and the impact societally that has, we have to learn how to address that, and we have to come up with a plan. Now, some are proposing that we will have some form of universal basic income. And what format does that take? Does it truly look like a socialist economy? I don't see how that works really well, because every time we've implemented a socialist economy, it is destructive to the human soul. And that's just a reality. You can look at what happened in the Soviet Union and in what's occurring even in the United States today with the attempts to socialize large swaths of the economy. It's not making things better. It actually creates more unrest and more difficulties and less meaning of who we are as people and how we derive that sense of self-worth and accomplishment. These are legitimate societal troubles that we are inventing for ourselves as we are inventing solutions to the labor shortages that we are finding. Now, I believe in many ways there is a solution. I do believe that, because when you have just one problem, it's hard. There may not be an obvious solution. And when you have two, there again, it could be very difficult, and there may not be an obvious solution. But when you have three, then you have the opportunity for creative solutions to come into play, and some items that maybe were not possible with problem number two, but problem number three interacting with problem number one gives you the ability to create solution number one. Solution number one, in many people's book, is that universal basic income. And in a conversation with my son, one of my sons, he had this idea of, essentially we become more able to do whatever we want and to investigate the things we want. And it dawns on me that this is a new renaissance. And if you look at back in history, the late 1300s to beginning there, and then all the way up to about 1700s when the world started to go back to war, you had a renaissance, and there was amazing amounts of science, technology, art, culture, things that were developing and beginning to emerge as the world shifted from a world of oppression and overall just you've got to do battle every day to survive into something where divisions of labor have yielded large improvements in time and resource processes, or the resources that are coming into the system, and that essentially enabled whole swaths of the economy to go from not even having light at night to being able to have whale oil, and then from there to the electric light and everything that's developed from there. You look at all of those advances that occurred. Now I overlay that on the opportunities and the problems that are facing us as an overall society going forward. And I believe these problems enable us to, as a society, enter a new Renaissance period where people will be able to explore and learn and grow and become something more over time. And this growth that's occurring, I really see as being sort of a rebirth in that regard of that Renaissance. And who knows? I may be completely off on this, but we need right now thinkers. We need authors. We need statesmen and scientists and artists and explorers. Well, all of those things were part of the Renaissance. That's what we need right now. And oftentimes when you are looking at the world and the changes and the struggles that are occurring, you have the ability to look back at your history. Again, if you don't understand history, you're doomed to repeat it. But perhaps in this case, if we're looking at it and understanding what's occurring, we have the ability to engineer, so to speak, the beginnings of a new Renaissance, and the growth opportunities for science and engineering and for creative works and for the investigation of the things that you've wondered about. Imagine being able to just spend the time to go and investigate any particular question that hits your mind. And to know that you're not going to starve because you're doing that. And that as you participate in that process, you're actually going to perhaps gain a reward that is added to this whole process. I think, I'm trying to think Martin, it was one of his TED Talks that he was talking about, but Martin Ford, I think is his name. He was talking about the whole idea of explicit incentives, and that resonated a little bit. I think that's part of the potential solution to this whole universal basic income. I don't know that it's a complete solution, but as you are producing more value to this from an intellectual perspective, from an exploration or from an artistic, or each item that you generate, the content that you build for the community to consume, the kindnesses that you render to individuals that may be harder to necessarily document and track, but from a perspective of service projects created and taken undertaken for assisting your neighbor or something like that, that's a little easier to engage in. And there's going to be people that what they want to do is help other people. You look around you, there are people right now who love to help, and they do it because that's what they love to do. Now they have a job because they have to, but as we look at the economy as it begins to change and morph because of labor being transitioned into an overall machines doing the work, it will be necessary for us to have a better plan. And I again, I don't have all the answers. To some extent, I think there will be opportunities early on for, the proverbial supervisor of the TeslaBot, somebody that's hanging out and paying attention to, and help ensuring that it's on task and on track and not making stupid logic mistakes. Because let's face it, we've all seen dumb things done by computers that are, it makes no sense. Who would actually do that? So I think that there will be some opportunities there for labor in the early transition periods. But really what I'm thinking about in this particular video is, the 20 to 30, say 2035 range. What's the world look like? What's the economy? And what's the state of how we're moving? And maybe it's 2045. I don't know. But it is, we have to come up with a solution there. In my mind, it has, if we don't, we're doomed to repeat what we are currently seeing: the unrest and the unraveling, and potentially the increased violence of the world in general. So as I look at it, there's a solution here. I think as we as people put our minds together and think about this and work through the process, how do we make a renaissance occur? How would this work? What's the value or the incentives that cause one to produce more, not just to consume? Because the economy does require consumption. It's a market economy. And even within socialist economies, it's a market economy. They just have a much reduced and trimmed down because they don't want to offer so many options. But the reality of it is, as this economy is out there, you have to have the ability to earn income in order to produce, in order to, or not to produce, but in order to consume, you have to have an income. And without that income, there's truly some problems that exist in this. From a trend standpoint, this could be catastrophic to just about every product on Earth. If every product were made by robots and no person had a job or a way to earn income, the world would cease to have a need for those very robots. So this is one of those items we have to think through and work through and come up with a meaningful solution and not a socialist solution. Because in my mind, every time we've tried that socialist experiment, actually it's not just my mind, but history has proven every time it's been tried, it's failed. So we have to create some form of a incentive-based solution that encourages production. And what that production is and the format it takes, that's the question. Is new discoveries something worthy of reward? I think the answer to that is yes. Are truly human-created art pieces that inspire and touch the heart, are those worthy? I believe the answer to that is yes. The same thing for books written and for all sorts of other creative content that is built. Is there a need for people who can speak and inspire? The world needs more Winston Churchills, in my opinion. I really do need people who can inspire us to be better, to be bolder, to be a greater society in that regard, to overcome the problems that we have and not to see the differences as the other or them, but to see them as the unique and culturally interesting component of our society. I think that as we look at this, the explorers could truly become some of the greatest opportunities. I remember growing up watching Jacques Cousteau. I lived to watch those episodes as a kid. I find every excuse to be able to watch them. How many more opportunities in this world of wonders for exploration? How many places have we not been? Things we haven't documented. Things we have seen, discovered, but not documented. Lots of them are out there. Things that need more investigation so that we can better understand the world we have. And then we look up. How much more is out there? What can we learn? What can we discover, study, and find as we truly dig in as a people and allow curiosity to have rule of that roost instead of a dependency upon your income to eat. And I'm not a fan of socialism. I don't believe it would work in this case. But I do believe, as we look at some of the online games and their economies that get built, there's incentives there. I believe that there's a potential for some of this to, the crypto definitely has an aspect in this where it comes into play. That DeFi model has a lot of hope for how we integrate some of these small transactions, I think, into our economies and work as we work together to solve this particular issue of what is value? How do we create value? How do we become something more? I'll leave that question with you tonight. Let's ponder that. Throw your solution, your ideas into the comments. I know not everybody's going to be happy with this particular one, but let's think about it. There is something more here. And as we explore some of those ideas, perhaps we can come up with another solution that's part of this. To be able to say, well, we know that socialism as explored in the communist societies has failed. But what can we do that would be productive, would be creative, that would generate revenue from a individual perspective? I think this is part of it. Again, as I've said many a times, what's here matters. Our ability to create, to be something over time better than what we were yesterday, that matters in this coming challenge and the economy that has to evolve in this process. So let's think about that. Put your comments in and we'll answer them and explore them together. For now, have a good night.